Welcome to Most Popular, the podcast that wants to be the cool art teacher who seems like she's super chill, but who's really the vice principal enforcing norms and eating stale crackers. That had nothing to do with research, by the way. It's just how I sort of probably would have pictured myself had, had I become a vice principal. Hi, I'm Dr. Trier-Bieniek. I'm your host. And in case you are hearing this for the first time, I am a real-life college professor of sociology. And I created this podcast to combine my two loves, pop culture and the impact it has on our lives. Today is a very exciting episode, especially if you are a Valencia student listening to this at Valencia College. Today I'm talking with Dr. Wendy Javoglu. And when we recorded this, Dr. Javoglu's position was the interim campus president for East and Winter Park at Valencia College. And since then, about a little under a year later, she became the provost of the Downtown Winter Park and Transfer Initiatives for Valencia College, and that is her current position. But I wanted to talk to her at the time, number one, because she was my main boss, and I found her fascinating after having worked with her for as long as I had. But I wanted to talk to her because of her dissertation, which was called Curating Culture Through Social Media in the 21st Century, Orlando as a Case Study for Arts Participation and Engagement Among Millennials. So basically, she looked at how social media is curating art and how millennials are soaking it all up. So all of these studies and all of the stuff you hear coming out now about social media engagement and what effect it has on especially young people's brains and our cognitive abilities, Wendy was kind of at the beginning of that. So this conversation is fascinating for a lot of reasons. One, it's a person that I am very proud to work with and to know a little bit. And also, it's extremely timely. Social media is here. And, in my classes, we can debate its good and bad. But it's fascinating to look at how it has evolved and what we're using it for. So with that said, I'm very excited to present this conversation with Dr. Javoglu. So welcome, Wendy, to Most Popular.
Thank you, Adrian. It's a pleasure to be here.
So from reading your bio, it is so clear how much you love community art programs. So just listen to this, everybody. She's on the board of directors for the Garden Theater, which is in Central Florida, the United Arts of Central Florida. She's won 2 awards from the League of Innovation in Community Colleges. She's got 3 National Endowment for the Humanities grants for summer study. She got a grant for a summer study at Cambridge University, and she's been awarded the University Club of Orlando Endowed Chair in the Humanities. So this is amazing. Where does all of this love of the arts come from?
Well, you've just called me out. I am a shameless humanities nerd. I'm proud of it, Adrian. And thinking about the question, I grew up doing all of the arts lessons, playing piano, playing flute, musical theater, art camp, all of that. And while my mother might tell you I was good enough at playing flute to have majored in music, I just kind of knew I wasn't by the time I was in high school, comparing myself to other serious musicians and people who just really had that natural talent. And what I learned is that I just loved the arts. I loved being in the mix, being in the theater, being in the museum, being in the symphony. And so when I got to college, I ended up becoming a humanities major after dabbling in business for about a year and a half. I didn't even know there was such a thing as humanities. So I kind of just became a connoisseur and an enthusiast and not necessarily a practitioner or working artist.
Were you in, because I was in musical theater plays in high school, and I hope the videos never surface, but in middle school and high school, did you do any of that stuff?
Oh, yes. And this is where, as we talk about generations later, because I'll reveal I'm a Gen X, I'm not a millennial. Yeah. I'm really glad that some of that archival footage is not as readily accessible. And we didn't have social media and all of that back then. But yes, there you might see me as a pirate in the Pirates of Penzance, or, a babe in Toyland, or something in the background in the Nutcracker. And yeah, a lot of that.
I was in Guys and Dolls, and I was one of the girls who were the dancers for the Adelaide character.
And looking back, it was
Mhm.
insanely inappropriate for a school to put this play on with like these 16-year-old girls in like little bikini tops. But at the time I was like, hey, check me out. Look at how great this is.
That's awesome. Most of the archival footage of me from high school would have been more bands, like wearing full, basic
Yeah.
uniform and making history as the first female president of the Melbourne High School band. There had never been a girl president ever
Way
in
to
the history of
go.
the band. And yeah, so breaking down barriers back
Yeah,
then.
your roots are deep. That's what I think is interesting about this. So when you got to college, you decided to do humanities. Was there anything that sort of nudged you in that direction other than loving arts?
Truly, it was taking like one of those basic intro to humanities classes
Mm-hmm.
and just loving my professor and finding out that it was a major. And then that day when I went to my advisor's office and she talked to me about majoring in humanities and then learning FSU had a study abroad program and kind of setting my eyes on that, which I did in Florence, Italy, and just realizing that this was my place. And I was kind of miserable as a business major, nor was I very successful.
It's amazing how much one professor can shape that too.
Absolutely.
What inspired you to move into a master's and a doctoral program?
So, back then, which was in let's just call it the early to mid 90s, when I was graduating with my bachelor's degree, and I had an area of focus in art history. There are very few things you can actually do with a bachelor's in humanities at the time. I'd say now, might be a little bit different. And so it seemed like a natural progression to keep going. And FSU had something called the Community College Teaching Program. And I was actually advised out of it, which was really interesting. However, I listened to my internal voice and said, but this sounds really cool. They're going to teach me how to teach at a community college, and I get to study more humanities. So I went ahead and went through that program. It was awesome. And the master's degree in humanities was amazing at FSU as well. And I was able to continue on with a focus in art history and what was then called the modern world, 19th and 20th centuries. And so I ended up doing a teaching internship at Tallahassee Community College, and then that helped me get a part-time teaching faculty job there when I graduated. So I did a lot of teaching at FSU and Tallahassee Community College in the humanities and art history, and it was my happy place, just hoping to be that professor to other students who maybe didn't know about the world of humanities and how it actually reflects them and their world today.
We're so parallel. Mine was gender studies, but yeah, I had the same thought of, if I can inspire somebody else, not even inspire, just give them a little bit of why this is so great, then I've done my job. And yeah. How?
Yeah. And these are like the fun classes, right? And I realized I didn't answer the question about the doctoral program at UCF. So I could just say that there was a big gap, a few decades in there where I taught. I taught at Tallahassee Community College, and then I got my teaching job at Valencia. And it was not until I was a few years into my dean job at Valencia that I took the leap and started the doctoral program. And I'll just say that a little plug for the University of Central Florida Text and Technology program, that it really is a 21st century humanities program. And I picked it because it seemed like an actual degree that picked up where mine left off, if that makes any sense. Like, a couple decades ago, when I finished my master's, here's where humanities was, and then here's where it is now. So I started that in 2012, and I just really wanted to have a mix of going to class with other students and like being on a campus and online. So it was really great because it was kind of the best of both worlds there. And it's an interdisciplinary program where you can, aside from the core courses, you can dabble in different departments and disciplines. And so I was able to take classes in philanthropy and social entrepreneurship and really like merge all of my interests together.
I always think that it's better when you can do that sort of self-driven, well-rounded path for your education. I'm a big advocate of that. Okay, so in a kind of a real nutshell, because we'll get into the details in a second, but talk about what your dissertation was and what you studied.
Okay, sure. So I would call my dissertation both personal and professional. As I mentioned, I was working in really arts administration, but at a college at the time, and knew that I wanted to do something in that field. So I'm going to nerd out and tell you my dissertation title, which is Curating Culture Through Social Media in the 21st Century, Orlando as a Case Study for Arts Participation and Engagement Among Millennials. And so at that time, I was approaching about the 20-year mark of living in Orlando, and I had seen such change in the city of Orlando in terms of being an arts epicenter. And it was really important to me to connect my research to my community. And I'll just say that my nascent research is always fun to go back and look at your first projects. I was looking at how technology was being incorporated into the arts, things like tweet seats at the theater, where only these rows of patrons could sit and use Twitter and live tweet an event. And that was groundbreaking. Or some of the crowdsourcing that was happening, like in England, there was the Royal Opera did the first Twitter opera where they created an operatic libretto out of tweets and stuff like that.
Wow.
Those things kind of felt gimmicky at the time, and maybe they've withstood the test of time. But by the time I got to, to thinking about dissertation, I really wanted to do a community service project and look at a generation, so the millennials, and I'm a millennial wannabe. I'm really Gen X. I think I have a lot of millennial characteristics, even though I'm Gen X, that I wanted to really look at this generation that might be able to help save the arts if the arts needed to be saving, to really see the millennials, some of them were getting, sometimes a bad rap, let's just say. And they seem to be this target demographic that all of the arts organizations wanted, and yet these foreign creatures that nobody could understand. And to me, I thought, the arts are prepped and primed to receive millennials who are steeped in participatory culture and a lot of the things that the arts are all about. So I just kind of set out to test some of those ideas through my dissertation.
What did you find? Just kind of, I know I said for research methods students, you can, nerd out as much as you want. But what did you find? What was your kind of main takeaway from it?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'm going to try and keep it brief. And I will also say that I have a tiny URL /Javoglu dissertation, and we can link up to it. And anyone can read the full thing. It's a hyperlink, bookmarked PDF. It's easy to go straight to the part that you're interested in. So what I would say is that just a little bit about the study, because I think that'll help answer the question of what I found. One of the best and really oldest arts advocacy organizations in the United States is called American for the Arts. Its acronym is AFTA. And they had this 2015 Arts Engagement Survey that had some pretty cool findings about millennials from across the country and their levels of participation and what they viewed as art, anything from the Instagram posts and photos that they take and share on their own social media pages to just posting about other arts events, just the different constructs of what millennials considered arts participation was really interesting. And so I got permission from AFTA to replicate some of their questions just for Central Florida millennials. And I wanted to see, well, how do we measure up against, the national cohort? And so I found that we actually had higher engagement levels for millennials. And I think a lot of that is because we had just opened our Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, which at the time, was really foregrounding its mission of arts for every life and doing a lot of diverse, non-stuffy arts programming. We also have a lot of festivals and arts and non-traditional venues, which the national data suggested millennials prefer festivals and non-traditional venues, and Orlando also certainly suggested that in the data. I'll also tell you, I wrote some of my own survey questions, so I had that survey data, and I can share with you what I found from that. And then I also interviewed 6 executive directors from Central Florida arts organizations. Can I give them a shout out, Adrienne?
Of course.
Okay, great. So the organizations that I worked with, I got to interview executive directors, and I have to say I did know all of them anyways from working in the arts, but I learned so much about them through this process. From Central Florida Community Arts, Creative City Project, which is known for Immerse in Central Florida, where the arts become unleashed on all of downtown Orlando, and then there's digital programming throughout the year. Downtown Arts District, Orlando Fringe, and Garden Theater. And so what I did, and what was interesting is that most of the executive directors were millennials themselves. So it was really great to get their perspective on how engaging with millennials in their organizations was different than working with other generations. And then, so I basically triangulated the data and came up with an arts action plan of 5 things our organization should do right now if they're looking to use digital technologies and social media to engage with millennials. So I'll just rattle off some of the stats without getting too deep, but there's a question in there where millennials could agree to some extent that a vibrant arts and culture scene is important to them when considering in what city they will live. And so 97% of my millennials who took the survey, and that was about 100 respondents of the survey,
wow,
did agree that. And at the time, 52% of the AFTA millennials had said that was important to them. Now, you have to also keep in mind, and, down the road, we could talk limitations of the study, and that's my dissertation, that, in the years from 2015 to the year that I was surveying, which is 2018, that's kind of maybe a natural shift anyways, but that's a pretty high level of agreement. And also very typical, I think, that millennials at the time, the data was suggesting that millennials would first pick a city where they wanted to live and then go and get a job. So I'm connecting those dots to say that, wow, well, if there's a vibrant arts and cultural scene, then that might make that city more attractive. Other things that were really interesting, this is one that really ties to my action plan. At the time, the AFTA millennials, only 46% of them agreed with the statement, everyone in my community has equal access to the arts. And I thought that was pretty low. However, the Central Florida millennials, only 26% agreed with that. So that was an interesting data point for me to say, okay, that's about a quarter of these millennials believe that in our community there's equal access. And so I have a few ideas on what to do about that. Other things, what the top social media platforms were, like 99% Facebook, 77% Instagram, 51% YouTube. Like those were the top 3 social media platforms at the time. I think that would probably be a little different now. And then 86% of the respondents agreed that they're more exposed to arts and culture through social media. What was really interesting about that is that I was able to segment my data, and it was a Qualtrics survey. According to those who had responded that they had some kind of arts experiences like we did, Adrienne, like in their K through 12, like outside extracurricular years, like those who had any kind of dance lessons, music lessons, theater, or they did art, or they went to museums or did anything in their upbringing had higher engagement levels as adults, which was pretty cool. And then those who also identified themselves as donors, who currently as adult millennials give to arts organizations, also had higher engagement levels. So there was some really cool segmentation of data based on like those who give, those who had arts in their upbringing, and that could help arts organizations with their messaging, for, their millennial constituencies. And so I'll pause for a minute because I could get into the themes from the executive directors, which are kind of cool. But I don't know if you have any questions on any of that so far.
Couple of things to fill in the blanks. By the way, it's really heartening to hear that arts are still something people look for when they are looking for their community. And also that they are, I mean, you would know more than I would, but it seems like since art has been around, the people have been making the case that this makes you a better human, like a human person living amongst us if you have some exposure to art in some capacity in your childhood, even just in some sort of, during your formative years. It's great to hear that continues to stay strong because, we're living in a time where art isn't always valued. So that's really heartening, and it's kind of like, I don't know, it's my high point for the day. It's good to hear.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I worry with, let's face it, we're having this discussion in our post-pandemic or during the pandemic times, and these arts organizations are experiencing now something similar to the 2008 recession, which is really scary for a lot of arts organizations. And so I really, really hope, already the digital creativity and the virtual remote happenings and other education opportunities are bolstering these organizations. But I really, really hope that, maybe this discussion we're having will help to raise awareness as well of what the arts can do for a community to further engage.
That really leads well into one of my questions, which is I wanted to hear about what struggles you thought community art-based programs face. Like what challenges do they face?
Sure. So, the way I answered it in my dissertation would be different than now because, as I mentioned with COVID-19 and how the arts are responding, it's really hard when you look at that loss of revenue, whether it's for visitor serving organizations, like museums and history centers or, ticketed events. And so I would say, one of the struggles right now is just responding to that. Those organizations that have a diverse funding model are probably less, I'd say less at risk, because of this loss of revenue, but it's very, very hard. So I would say, just looking at sources of revenue, grants and community organizations that can help fund the arts and the loss of that revenue is a struggle. I think also when we look at, our world right now, and looking at the history of philanthropy, the arts have often been viewed as a nice to have versus a need to have. And so when people give, they often want to give to those life-saving organizations, right? Like the American Heart Association or, Red Cross or, and so that is a struggle. Now, I make a case in my action plan to say that if the arts foregrounded the story of what they do for the community in terms of putting people to work and the economic impact of the arts and building diverse communities and providing access and empathy building and all of that, that kind of story might appeal more also to millennial donors. The big struggle is just competition, right? Competition for entertainment. Why leave your house, right? With all of this wonderful media streaming we have.
Yeah.
And of course, we've been forced to stay at home for some time now during our quarantine. But really at the time I was writing my dissertation, that was one of the big struggles was that people were more likely to want to have a Netflix and chill night than go buy a ticket and go somewhere.
Yeah.
And, possibly, yeah. I would just say possibly the pretense, that was, some people have a stereotypical view like, oh, the arts are so pretentious or you have to dress up or, so I think it's kind of an identity crisis is something that could make an organization struggle.
Yeah, or that it has to be inside or, I like street art. Every city I visit, every place I go, I try and find street artists in some capacity and either listen or buy whatever they're selling or what. I was in Rome and this woman was selling these pictures that she gets from somewhere. Like she buys the picture and then she watercolors over them and they're different scenes and stuff. And somebody next to me said, that's just common. That's just so basic and there's no reason to buy that. And I thought, well, for I think it was €5, I can buy this cute little picture that she hand painted. Yeah, that she hand painted, and who cared? This is hers, and I'm taking it, and thank you. That's some of my favorite stuff to do. What do you kind of started in this direction, but what do you wish people knew more about when it came to arts and community engagement and being a part of arts in the community?
Sure. I would say, the education programming, in many cases, you have organizations, I'll take Central Florida Community Arts, who partner with public schools, and we have amazing K through 12 Orange County Public School and Osceola County Public School arts education programs. There are other organizations like Central Florida Community Arts that will kind of overlay, with their own programming or provide camps or after school programs, lessons. So we've got an incredible education arm of nearly every arts organization. You mentioned earlier about, the arts, like we need the arts to expand our empathy and to, help us process emotions and to help transform our lives and just that good stuff that we get from the arts. A big movement in the arts right now is arts and wellness or arts and health. And so there are many organizations. I'll say Valencia is a part of a task force in Central Florida really looking at that. And there's a lot of great data behind how you can live a physically, mentally, emotionally healthy life by being engaged in the arts. The arts hold up a mirror to our communities, the good and the bad, and help us process, our uniqueness and our opportunities for improving our communities. And let's just face it, the arts provide fun and in-person experiences and might force us to wake up and experience something live. And there's nothing like a live performance. That moment that the curtain goes up is that goosebump moment, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. While you were talking, I was thinking, I don't know if I mentioned this. I did my dissertation on the way women use music to heal after they've experienced trauma. So it was,
wow.
it was sort of it was sociology, but it was more holistic healing area. And we are recording this during COVID. We're recording this as people are protesting the deaths of several people of color. And the somebody posted a meme, I want to say on Instagram, a few weeks ago that said, remember what entertained you during COVID. Remember what kept you sane in these moments. It was music and it was visual art and it was movies or television or something along those lines. Because sometimes we forget that that's what this is doing. It's offering a service for your emotional support. Especially music is a little more personal for people, but it's offering that emotional support to you. That's what I think the power of art has,
Absolutely. And I will say, Valencia's student development had a remembrance on Facebook Live and Instagram on Friday for Pulse. And they had the whole first 45 minutes was a live band, a wonderful band called Divine AF, and they were amazing. I mean, I'm sitting here watching them play, listening to them talk about why they're here and, why we were gathered. And, I've got tears in my eyes and goosebumps, and it's just that live experience, even, through the computer. It's overwhelming and it's needed.
Well, thank you so much. I want to ask you one question that I'm asking everybody. And you can answer it any way you like. It's basically whatever comes out of your head or your mouth in that moment. But since the title of my podcast is Most Popular, I ask everybody, who or what do you think deserves to be voted most popular?
Okay. Well, I've got to give a nod to the artist, right? Because we're talking about the art. But let me kick it up a notch and say, not sure if you've heard this term before, the art-trepreneurs.
Oh, no. What is that?
Yeah. So, and I didn't coin the phrase, and there is a wonderful other podcast locally about art entrepreneurship. It's hosted by Cole Neesmith from Creative City Project, where these are artists who are entrepreneurial. I mean, they're like social entrepreneurs, but for the arts. Making our world better through the arts and creating business opportunities and innovations and finding ways to use the arts to solve some of our problems. And so that's who I would say is most popular in my book right now.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find more episodes of Most Popular on iTunes and SoundCloud. More information, including additional resources for educators, can be found on my website, which is Trier-Bieniek.com. And if you don't know how to spell that, which I guess you don't, the website is linked in episode notes, so my name is all there for you. I am on Instagram at dr.adriennetb. That's at dr.adriennetb. Always, always, always thank you so much to my students for the encouragement to keep making these episodes, and I will see you next time.